أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين. Continuing with our discussion which we have started a few lectures ago, where we were discussing the topic of empowerment versus spoon feeding or over directing the communities and the masses. After that discussion, we went into the consequences of spoon feeding, and that is what we have been discussing over these few lectures. We have discussed a few consequences. The last one which we discussed, and we intend to continue discussing that with the case study, that is the issue of imposing a narrative. Okay, we say those people who want to spoon feed, who want to over direct the masses, they will always impose a single narrative while disregarding the other narratives which even might be valid or even more valid. Okay, they will disregard it because it doesn't serve their purpose, and thus they want to stick with that single narrative. Okay, now before I continue with the discussion of Arbaeen which we started, just to give you an example of a proper case of empowerment versus spoon feeding in the current politics, I thought I should mention this so I'm a bit more clearer on this topic. Look at what's happening in New York. Yeah, last night we had the news of Zohran Mamdani winning and becoming the mayor of New York. Yeah, but look at what's happening. I believe this is a proper case of empowerment versus spoon feeding. Now, with the other side, those who stood against Zohran Mamdani in this elections and the establishment also, you look at what they've been doing for ages now, okay? For years and years, all what they've been trying to do is impose a single narrative for all this time, okay? They have been spending millions and billions to be able to impose this single narrative on the masses in America. Now, to that extent, if you see that the way they're using money also, they end up buying recently, the buying and the purchasing of TikTok by the head of Oracle, okay? Millions and billions being spent. The buying of Twitter, the X, okay? Again, billions of dollars being spent to buy this. Now, this is not me saying it. Netanyahu, when he was talking to the influencers, he mentions these two when he was talking to them, and is like, we need to now come and impose our narrative on the people. He mentions these two social media apps, yeah, or social media platforms, which you can say that one was TikTok and one is X, okay, and that is why they really forced to buy TikTok, okay. So they've been spending millions and billions and years to try and impose their own single narrative. Now, what have they tried to impose? I'm just speaking in the context of New York, okay, and Mamdani. Otherwise, the other things they've done in the context of Zohran, they've imposed two things. One is, if you want to become a leader and a political leader in America or other Western countries, but particularly in America, you need to support Israel, and thus you need to be able to get the support of the Jewish lobby. Without that, it's impossible for you to become a leader. This is one narrative which they have been imposing for years now, and they've been spending money over it. Okay, we saw even in the previous elections which happened in America, and how the millions and billions were spent on trying to impose the same narrative. The second narrative which they've been imposing on the public, and that is that you cannot become a political leader, especially in America, without the support of the donors. So if the elite and the donors and the capitalists don't help you, again, by the way, I'm not totally against capitalism, but this extreme capitalism we're talking about, yeah? So if these elites and these donors don't support you, then you cannot become a political leader in America. Now, what happened? Zohran came and demolished both these narratives altogether. Okay? Number one, he proved that you can become a leader while criticizing what Israel is doing. Okay? To the extent of saying that no, we will follow laws to be able to make sure that Netanyahu is arrested in New York. To that level, the man went. And he still won. Okay? And number two, he even showed that it's possible to become a leader and a political leader in America without the help and support of the donors and the political elites. Okay? What he did was that he went to the people and the masses, and they are the ones who contributed to his whole election campaign. When he gathered $8 million, he came, that's the statement he used. He says that, I will tell you something which no politician will tell you, that now I don't need your money. Okay? This is what politicians are after money, but he came and strictly said that enough now, I don't need any more money. Okay? Notice he broke both these narratives, and thus he brought an awakening in within especially the young ones in America. Okay? This awakening came in. Why? And why did he manage to break these two narratives which were being imposed for so many years, and so much was being spent to impose this narrative? What was happening? The answer you could give, and this you could research yourself also, the answer I could reach to is empowerment. The difference between him and Andrew Cuomo and others is this, that he was empowering his voters and his people who were following him. And this is something they speak out. Those who voted for Mamdani, they mentioned this very clearly, that he was listening to us. He's somebody who is our voice. Okay? We feel that within him. Because he lived within them. He went to them instead of sitting in the air-conditioned conference rooms and making policies. No, he went to each and every individuals, to different organizations, to meet them, to be able to get these policies done. Okay? This is where this whole power comes in. That he empowered the people and they trusted him and they gave him the victory. Okay? And that is why when he was giving the victory speech, he really, really relied on the people. The speech he gave was like, if you want to come and hurt New York, you will have to go through every one of us. That's the reliance on the power which he has given to them. He's empowered them so much that now he can rely on them. Okay? That is what I'm trying to talk about, empowerment versus spoon feeding. He wasn't doing the spoon feeding. And what surprised me was here is that he himself was mentioning this in one of the interviews. He's saying that 90,000 volunteers. This is not a small number. 90,000 volunteers helped him in his campaign, free. Others had to pay others to come and help. These were people who took interest themselves and came and helped this campaign. 90,000. Okay? Where does this come from? Because they were belonging to this group, belonging to his ideas. He would listen to them. Okay? This is what we call empowerment. Okay? So the conclusion I want to take from here is that it's time for establishments, be it political, be it religious, to wake up. Okay? We are seeing these awakenings going on in different countries, in different places, by the Gen Zs especially. Okay? You see how much the young ones supported Mamdani also. So this was a poll taken just before the elections. Look at how many, 18 to 34-year-olds, 64% backed Mamdani, supported Mamdani. 64%. Okay? This is what we're talking about, the Gen Zs and the millennials now. 35 to 49-year-olds, 50%. Can you see? The support he was getting was from the young ones and from the youths. And these are lessons to be learned by our establishments, by our communities. that we need to empower back our masses to be able to get back this support from them. The youths are there. It's just that we need to empower them. Okay? And otherwise, if we don't empower them, we'll end up losing them. Sometimes they will even stand up against ourselves. And this is what we are seeing here in Nepal, in Sri Lanka, in Bangladesh, some countries in Africa also. Now, I'm clarifying this. I'm not talking about hooliganism, okay? I'm talking about a proper protest done in a legal way. You don't come and vandalize and become hooligans, okay? So this is what's happening. Even in Morocco, we saw that. With Zimbabwe, we saw that. These are things which you see this, that the Gen Zs are waking up and they're not accepting this imposition of a single narrative, okay? Now, I thought I mentioned this because I felt it was a proper case of what we have been discussing. I'm sorry, I got into a bit of politics, but I felt it was important. Coming back to our discussion. I'm sorry, I might take a bit of time today. My apologies from the beginning. We have been discussing the issue of and the topic of Arbaeen. We had our preliminary discussions, and then we discussed, in the previous lecture, we discussed the whole issue of what transpired on the day of 20th Safar, on the day of Arbaeen. The first issue which we discussed was whether the family of Imam Husayn alayhi salam went from Sham to Karbala to Kufa to Medina or no. They went straight from Sham to Medina, okay? We said that at least there are 3, if not 4 opinions on this topic. To impose a single narrative on this issue was not right. We discussed that. A related topic to that, which we started it in the previous discussion, was the issue of the head of Imam Husayn or the heads of the martyrs. Okay, this is a discussion which is very closely related to coming to Karbala. So if you remember in the previous discussion, we quoted Abu Rayhan Biruni, the genealogist in the 5th century. He's the only classical source who is mentioning that the head of Imam Husayn alayhi salam was returned back to Karbala on the 20th Safar by the 4th Imam and the family. Okay, he's the only source for this. Okay, so you notice that it's very much closely related to the issue of the heads. Okay, so today what we want to discuss is this issue of the head of Imam Husayn or heads of the martyrs. Okay. Very quickly giving you a summary of the discussions, and then I want to get into some discussions. I'm sorry, sometimes I'll get a bit technical, but I feel I don't want to oversimplify our discussions. We have to maintain a bit of standards, okay? So, issue number 1, in regards to the heads of the martyrs, you notice that all the sources and the evidence we have is about the head of Imam Husayn alayhi salam only. We don't have evidence, simply silence from history. We don't have any evidence what happened to the heads of the other martyrs. So if you see a scholar telling you that the heads of the martyrs also were buried in some place, as some have suggested, this is purely a probability which they're trying to give, okay? But there's no evidence for that. Point number 1. Point number 2, when we come to sources, and this is where you come and see that the difference in sources shows you by itself that there's no single opinion on this. You cannot come and impose a single narrative on this issue, okay? So when it comes to the sources, you have the Shia sources, which will tell you that the head of Imam Husayn alayhi salam is either buried in Karbala or Najaf. Okay, so some other opinions are there. Allahumma Madlisi quotes them like they're buried in the heavens and all whatnot. Those are not very common opinions. I'm leaving them aside, okay? These 2 opinions, and we'll come and discuss what is the basis of these 2. In the Sunni world, you will see that there opinion is more inclined towards either Medina. So the famous opinion is Medina or Sham, Damascus. Okay. So for example, Ibn Sa'd in his Tabaqat, he proposes Medina, and other historians. Baladhuri, he's another Sunni historian, he proposes Sham as a place of burial of the head of Imam Husayn alayhi salam. Okay, so there's a difference of opinion, a very clear difference of opinion in within, as we have in lots of issues within history. Sunnis have one narrative, Shias have one narrative, and it shows you that the bias is playing around with these narratives. Yeah. Now, again, I'm not trying to say that total biases, but there are biases playing. One of the opinions is right. Okay. Point number 2. Point number 3 is the whole issue of Karbala, whether Imam Husayn alayhi salam's head is buried in Karbala. The evidence for this is purely and purely Shuhra. Okay, it's purely popularity and fame. Do you get me? Okay, there's no evidence outside there. When we come to Najaf, we'll see evidence in books, and it's one of those cases where you have evidence, but scholars have gone against the evidence. Okay, now what is Shuhra? Okay, and this is where I said I'll become a bit technical. We'll discuss a bit of Hausa discussions in a very simplified manner, but we need to discuss this and not oversimplify our discussions. This is Usulul Fiqh of Sheikh Muhammad Rida Muzaffar. These are books which are studied in the Hausa. Okay, so and that's why I'm quoting these books. This is the second volume. He talks about Mabahithul Hujjah. Okay, what constitutes to become an evidence? Okay, what has authority to become an evidence? Okay, so you have Quran, you have Hadith, you have different things. One of those issues they discuss is the issue of Shuhra. Okay, so we want to come and define Shuhra. Now, before we end up defining Shuhra, look at why am I saying this? Why is it important for us to discuss Shuhra and see that scholars depend on Shuhra to be able to prove that the head of Imam Husayn was buried in Karbala. So this is Sayyid ibn Tawus in his Luhuf on page number 82. He says, "Anna amal al-isaba ala dhalik." Okay, so it's basically the ulama have actually opined on this issue. They have the opinion that the head of Imam Husayn alayhi salam was buried with his body. Okay, now you see, it's Sayyid ibn Tawus coming in the 7th century, coming and proposing a Shuhra. And this is one of the biggest challenges when it comes to the issue of Shuhra. So again, I'm getting into some of the discussions so you're aware that what's happening. When you come and discuss fame and Shuhra, one of the difficult things you have is to prove that this Shuhra has been there in the earlier generation and the later generation. So scholars would divide 7th century, 6th, 7th century onwards would be considered later scholars, and the earlier than 6th century would be considered the earlier scholars. Okay, so Sayyid ibn Tawus is basically, if you want to say, is in between or leaning towards the later scholars. So one of the challenges we have is to prove that this Shuhra and this popularity even existed in the earlier generation. Okay, and thus you have the likes of Ayatollah Burjardi, who doesn't accept popularity of the later scholars. He accepts the popularity of the earlier scholars. Okay, so this is Sayyid ibn Tawus. Come to Allama Majlisi in his Bihar. He says, notice his statement, he makes it very clear. وَالْمَشْهُورُ بَيْنَ عُلَمَائِنَا الْإِمَامِيَّةِ. Okay? It's famous, it's popular within the Shia scholars. أَنَّهُ دُفِنَ رَأْسُهُ مَعَ جَسَدِهِ. His head was buried with his body. Okay? And then he goes further and shows that he doesn't accept that earlier opinion. He says, وَقَدْ وَرَدَتْ أَخْبَارٌ كَثِيرَةٌ فِي أَنَّهُ مَدْفُونٌ عِنْدَ قَبْرِ أَمِيرِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ عَلَيْهِ السَّلَامِ. But we have plenty of riwayats which say that he is buried near the grave of Imam Ali alayhi salam. Can you see this? Okay, scholars themselves are agreeing that there are two opinions. One is a mashhur and a famous opinion, a popular opinion. One is riwayats, which we will come and study them, which say that he is buried near Imam Husayn alayhi salam. Okay, now, so come back to the whole issue of shuhra. What is shuhra? What is popularity? So on page number 290 onwards, he discusses this whole issue of shuhra. Okay, so he says شهرة باصطلاح الفقهاء على ما لا يبلغ درجة الإجماع. Okay, and this is something for those of you who are doing research. You need to be able to identify which level of evidence are we talking about. Okay, so shuhra is an evidence lower than, rather much lower than ijma' and consensus. Okay, so you have consensus of scholars and then you have fame within the scholars. These two are not the same. Ijma is higher than. Okay, so scholars discuss these other statements which you can see. Inshallah, some other time we can discuss that. Okay, so anything which has not reached the level of consensus is called shuhra. So if I put in numbers, I'm just trying to put up in numbers, but these are not the right numbers. Okay, I'm just trying to put them in numbers. So if you have ijma', which is 80% of scholars or 90% of scholars, 40-50% would be considered shuhra. Okay, this is the difference. Okay, so this is higher and this is lower. Now, shuhra is divided into three. Again, please, I would like you to concentrate for a while and inshallah we reach to our conclusions. Shuhra is divided into three. One is shuhra al-amaliya or istinadiya, number one. Shuhra riwaiya, number two. And shuhra fatwaiya, number three. Okay? So I'll try to explain it in very simple terms. So we have shuhra amaliya or istinadiya. Its name is there. The fame, referential fame, okay? Or practical fame, if you want to call it that way. What does it mean? This is where you have popularity on one side and fame of an opinion on one side, but the source of it is still available with us. Okay? That means this popularity, where did it come from? It came from, for example, this hadith. Even if it's a da'if hadith, there's a weak hadith, but still it's existing outside. Okay? It's not non-existent. The hadith is there still. Okay, and thus scholars have relied for their shuhra and their fame on this particular hadith, even if it's weak. Okay, do you get me what the shuhra amaliya means? Okay, this practical fame means that you have fame on one side, you have the existing source outside. Now, the scholars do discuss if it's a weak hadith. Okay, does this popularity compensate for the weakness of this hadith or no? That's a discussion. They have it some other places, inshallah, we can discuss. That's not our discussion because that's not where our discussion lies. The second type of shuhra is shuhra riwaiya, meaning the narrated fame. Okay, meaning what? We have two contradictory hadith. Okay, one is popular, and thus the other one is called shadh. You might have heard the word shadh. Shadh is a hadith which is not popular within the scholarship. Okay, so shuhra riwaya means a riwaya has got shuhra, has got fame and has got popularity over the other hadith. Again, that's not also our discussion. The third discussion is our discussion. The whole thing, I brought it to this discussion. Shuhra al-fatwaiya. So you have jurisprudential fame. Meaning what? This is the opposite of the first one. Meaning you have popularity, the opinion is popular. Again, we have defined what is popular, yeah? Lesser than ijma' and consensus. So the opinion is popular, but there's no source for it outside. There's no evidence existing outside for this shuhra. It's a mere shuhra which has passed through generations And this is what I said. Sometimes it's hard to prove that it passed through generations. But there's a claim that some scholars make about Shuhra at times. Okay? So this claim is being made, but there's no evidence outside. So now the scholars are discussing, okay, that is this Shuhra Hujjah or no? Is it authoritative? Can you use it as evidence or no? Because there's no source for it outside. You can't go and examine the evidence itself. Okay? Now, Sheikh Ayatollah Subhani, he quotes Ayatollah Burjardi, he says 90 fatwas in fiqh. Okay? It's not a small number. 90 fatwas in Shia fiqh is based upon Shuhra. This is only fiqh, huh? We are not discussing outside fiqh. Only in fiqh. 90 fatwas are based on Shuhra. That means there's no evidence outside. Scholars have relied upon the popularity of that opinion and thus given fatwa on that. Okay? So scholars are now discussing, is this hujjah or not? Is this evidence to be used, if I can say, in the court of law? You can come and say in the court of Allah and say, okay, this was hujjah, you gave it to me or no? Scholars get divided into three. Okay? There are those scholars who outright reject this Shuhra altogether. They are saying we cannot accept Shuhra, okay? Because it's a weaker method of having your evidence, okay? So they don't accept it at all. But these scholars ended up facing a lot of issues, okay? So start from the classical scholars. You have the likes of Ibn Junayd, Ibn Abi Aqil al-Ummani. These are names you might have not even heard of them at times. Okay, so Ibn Abi Aqil al-Ummani is the teacher of Sheikh Mufid. But strangely enough, you will find that you don't know his birth date, you don't know his death date, you don't know about his books. His opinions are found in Sheikh Allam Hilli's books. Okay, you'll go to Al-Khilaf of his, you'll find some opinions found there. But his books are not there. Ibn Junayd's books are not there altogether. Okay? Or for example, even Sheikh Saduq. Okay, I discussed Sheikh Saduq in my first series, which we were discussing. We discussed the fatwas which we gave against the popular opinion. And that is why you can refer to the first discussion, the series which we discussed about Sheikh Saduq. You come to later scholars, you have the likes of Ibn Idris al-Hilli, Muhaqqiq al-Hilli. These were scholars staying in Hilla. They went against the popular opinion, okay? Then you have the likes of Mullah Faiz Kashani or Muqaddas Ardabili. Muqaddas Ardabili or Muhaqqiq Ardabili is very famous for giving opinions against popularity. Okay, as we said, we can come and discuss him some other times and mention these unpopular opinions, if we can call it that way. Okay, now that is one direction. Some scholars have said Shuhra, not at all evidence. Some have gone towards its evidence. Okay, so the likes of Sheikh Kulaini and then later. So for example, Ayatollah Burjardi really relied on Shuhra. Okay, he made it one of his bases of ijtihad also. That Shuhra of Mutaqaddimin, the earlier scholars' popularity on any issue really constitutes as an evidence. Okay. The third group of scholars are those scholars who I would say that they don't accept the hujjiyya, they don't accept the authoritativeness of Shuhra and fame, but when it comes to implementation, they have been a bit, they turn towards ihtiyat more. Again, inshallah, some other time we can come and discuss this ihtiyat. Shaykh Baqir al-Sadr defines it. He finds the issues of ihtiyat a bit. He has his own discussions on ihtiyat, worthy of discussion. Inshallah, some other time. They turn towards ihtiyat. Okay? So, for example, you'll find Ayatollah Khui, for example, who doesn't accept Shuhra, okay, as an evidence. But when it comes to giving fatwas, he doesn't very quickly deny the Shuhra. He is not very quick in doing the way, for example, Muqaddas Ardabili and others did. Do you get me? Okay? So one of those examples is Sheikh Muhammad Rida Muzaffar himself. So on page number 294, he says, وَالْحَقِّ أنه لا دليل على حجية الظن ناشئ من الشهرة مهما بلغ من القوة. However strong this shuhra and fame is, there is no evidence for it, and there's no hujjiyah for it. Can you see that? Okay. So now you come and ask him that why is it not being used by scholars then? So on page number 300, he comes and gives you the reason. Okay, he says, من المعروف عن المحققين من علمائنا. Okay, this is very famous and very popular again amongst the scholars within the Shia world of Shia school of thought. أنهم, now the word he uses, okay, أنهم لا يجرؤون على مخالفة المشهور إلا مع دليل قوي. They don't have jur'ah, okay, I'm using his words. They don't have the courage to break away from this shuhra and this fame unless they have a very strong proof. Now, he goes further by saying, no, بل ما زالوا يحرصون على موافقة المشهور. Rather they are greedy. The word he's using is they have hirs, they are haris, okay? They are basically, they insist on staying on the popularity, on the popular opinion. They don't want to move away from it. Okay? ولو كان الدال على غيره أولى بالأخذ. Even if the research they have reached to is stronger. Okay? So they have reached to an opinion which is even stronger than the popular opinion. They will still not oppose the shuhra and the popularity. Okay? So in theory, it's not a very strong opinion. It's not a very strong evidence. But when it comes to practicality, scholars are, so the word Sheikh Mudaffar uses is they don't have the jur'ah, okay? They don't have that courage to be able to come out of it very quickly and say that, oh, we are going against the shuhra, okay? So now, this whole discussion I brought up was for this. That you notice that there is shuhra within the scholars, that the head of Imam Husayn alayhi salam is buried in Karbala. There's no other evidence apart from shuhra. So if you accept shuhra, then beautiful. But allow others to differ because others don't accept shuhra as hujjah. Okay, as you have seen the scholars I've quoted. Now, to give you an example of how shuhra works, I thought I give a very simple example so that you can understand. Okay, this was, I don't know if it was a complicated example or not, but I would like to give a very simple example so that you can understand how shuhra works, okay, how fame and popularity works. This is Allama Majlisi in his Zadul Ma'ad, page number 250. He says, وَالْمَشْهُورُ بَيْنَ عُلَمَاءِ الْإِمَامِيَّةِ. Okay, I'm giving a very simple example, a non-controversial example, hopefully, to be able to prove how shuhra works, okay? It's mashhur. Notice he says, it's famous and it's popular within the Shia scholars. أن وفاة رسول الأعظم صلى الله عليه وآله وقع في 28 من هذا الشهر. Okay? The death day of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was on the 28th of Safar. It's a popular opinion. Is there evidence for it? No. Do you get me? Okay. Now this is not me saying there's no proof for that. There's a very beautiful book written by a scholar called Yadullah. Now Muqaddasi, Maqdisi. My apologies. I'm very weak in this pronunciation of names and words. This book was also recommended by Sheikh Muhammad Hadi Yusuf al-Gharawi. It's called Baz Pajjuhiyat Tarikh Wiladat wa Shahadat Ma'sumin alayhim salam. It's in Persian. As I said, that you can get these books and somehow use AI at least to get a picture and gist of what's going on. You don't get proper translations, but you get at least the gist of what's going on altogether. Okay? So, this book is an extensive book. It runs in 700 pages. Okay? All what it discusses is the dates of birth and death of the infallibles, alayhimus salam. Okay, that's what he does. So, what is the day? What is the month? What is the year? Okay, where is the place where they are buried? This is what he's discussing, and for each and every infallible. Okay, so when it comes to the Holy Prophet, on page number 123, look at what he says. بنابر آنچه گفته شد تحقیق و بررسی در منابع تاریخی قول مشخص و با مدرکی استوار را درباره ماه درگذشت رسول پروردگار به دست نمی‌دهد. Okay, so after what all we have said, after what all he has discussed, he says research and examination of historical sources do not provide a specific and well documented account of the month in which the Holy Prophet died. Can you see this? This is not me saying it. These are researchers saying that there's no evidence out there. So what are scholars doing now? They're doing ijtihad. Pure ijtihad when it comes to this issue. That, okay, we'll try put this. Now, personally for me, these are not issues which we need to get into. But for historians, these are very important things to get into, okay? So they will go into trying and finding out that, okay, where did the Prophet die? How did he die? Okay, what date did he die? Even if there's no good evidence for it, they still will go into it as historians. Okay, now that's their field, they need to go into it. But there's no real evidence to stand upon outside. And that is why it's mashhur, shuhra. Okay, now when you come to shuhra, look at how many. There are 14 opinions, out of which at least 4 or 5 opinions are popular. Okay, 14 opinions on the death day of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay, 28 Safar. This is adapted by Sheikh Mufid and Sheikh Tusi. Okay, 2nd Safar. Okay, this is a Shia scholar now. Ibn Shahr Ashub in his Manaqib. Now some say there's a scribal error here or not, but at least he says 2nd Safar is the death day of the Prophet. And then you have 1st Rabiul Awwal. Some Sunni scholars like Baladhuri and Ibn Manzur and them go in this. 3rd Rabiul Awwal, Ibn Sa'd, okay. Tabari also quotes from the Hijazi scholars. Yaqubi, okay. Yaqubi also gives this opinion, who is a Shia historian in the 3rd, 4th century. 3rd Rabiul Awwal, 8th Rabiul Awwal, Allama Majlisi gives it as provides it as an opinion, one of the opinions in Bihar also. Okay, 10th Rabiul Awwal, Ibn Kathir gives this as an opinion, though Saif ibn Umar is the narrator for this, who is a problematic narrator. So for those who are doing research, Saif ibn Umar is the only source of Tabari for the whole discussion of Abdullah bin Sabah. Okay, now I'm not trying to say Abdullah bin Sabah exists or doesn't exist. He is there in our riwayats, but Tabari relied on Saif ibn Umar. Okay, then 12th Rabiul Awwal, which is very famous within the Sunni world. Okay, so and that is why Sunnis have a dilemma now. The birth is 12th, the death day is also 12th. What do they do? Okay, and that is why I believe they prefer more to celebrate rather than commemorate. Now, this is something which even 2 Shia scholars have also accepted this opinion. Okay, so you have Sheikh Kulaini accepting this opinion, and you have Mas'udi, who was a 3rd, 4th century in his Muruj al-Dhahab also accepting this understanding. Okay, then you have 13th Rabiul Awwal. Okay, so you have the scholar by the name of Arbili in the 7th, 8th century, who wrote Kashf al-Ghumm, who was a Sunni scholar, who then became a Shia scholar then. Okay, he proposes this date and he proposes other dates also. But Allama Mamaqani, okay, who is the very famous scholar in Rijal also, his Tanqih al-Maqal is very famous. He also proposes this date of 13th. So you see, some Shia scholars also have different opinions in this direction. Okay, you have 14th, you have 15th Rabiul Awwal, you have 18th Rabiul Awwal. Okay, 18th Rabiul Awwal is also proposed by Shahid al-Awwal. This is again a Shia scholar in his Ad-Durus. Okay, he proposes 18th Rabiul Awwal. And finally the opinion is uh, 28th of Rabiul Awwal. Can you see this? Okay, 14 different opinions on one issue. Shows you that when Shia scholars come and rely, okay, or Sunni scholars come and rely on an opinion, then there's Shuhra playing its role now. Okay, this is how Shuhra works. That there's no evidence, real evidence, and a very strong evidence you can set upon and say this is a very mazboot and a very strong evidence. No, it's evidence which are all probabilities. You base your studies on probabilities and come up with, okay, you come and say, oh, okay, he was born probably in this day. He migrated to Medina on this day. Oh, okay, he stayed here on this day. That's how they work, okay? This will happen with a lot of ages. So come, you see also with the age of Bibi Fatima alayhi salam, okay, for example. You will see the same discussions happening. You will see difference of opinions also existing within the scholars themselves also on these issues. On certain, so many issues in history also, you will see this is mashhur is being relied upon. Shuhra is being relied upon. Okay? So, anybody accepting Shuhra as an evidence? Yes, you can say he's buried in Karbala. No, then at least allow this other opinion to exist outside. This was one issue. And the final issue which I want to discuss is the whole issue of Najaf. Okay, so some scholars, and especially the Akhbari leaning scholars like Allama Madlisi, they lean towards this opinion that the head of Imam Husayn alayhi salam was brought to Najaf. Okay, now the reason for that are the riwayats. Okay, and according to Allama Madlisi, you saw that وَقَدْ وَرَدَتْ أَخْبَارٌ كَثِيرًا. There are plenty of riwayats which say that Imam's head is buried in Najaf. Okay? Now this is a proper case of contradiction between Shuhra and riwayat. So what is to be done? I leave it upon you. Okay? So look at the riwayats very quickly. These are riwayats in books like Tahdhib and Kamil al-Ziyarat and Shk Ali Karmali. Okay? So for example, Imam Sadiq alayhi salam says, أنه مدفون بجنب أمير المؤمنين. Okay, the head of Imam alayhi salam is buried near Imam Ali alayhi salam, or it is madfunun بظهر الكوفة دون قبر أمير المؤمنين عليه السلام. It's buried behind Kufa, near the head, near the qabr of Imam Ali alayhi salam. So finally, I want to quote this riwayah from Shk Ali Karmali, just to show you that, you remember in the previous discussion we said that when Biruni says that, Abu Rayhan Biruni says that Imam Sajjad alayhi salam returned the head, we proposed and we say that it can be read as radda or it can be read as rudda. Okay? That the fourth Imam returned the head, or no, the head were returned back. Now, the heads were returned back. I'm basing it on this hadith. Okay, this is Shaykh Kulayni's hadith. Look at this, is an opinion which also needs to be explored further. Also, the riwayah says that the Rawi says, I was with sixth Imam alayhi salam wa huwa bil hira. Again, this is something we'll come and discuss subsequently when we discuss that did Imams go for ziyarah also or no. This is what we'll come and discuss. وَهُوَ بِالْحِيرَةِ. Hira is Kufa. Okay? So, he was in Hira. He tells the Rawi, he says, أَمَا تُرِيدُ مَا وَعَدْتُكَ. Don't you wish to do what I promised you? Okay, so Imam promised this Rawi something and he tells him, okay, let's do it now. So the Rawi says, yes, let's do it. And then he says himself that it was to go to the qabr of Imam Ali alayhi salam, to the grave of Imam Ali alayhi salam. They go there, okay? They pray there, they do the salat and all whatnot. And then, the riwayah, interestingly, has the son of Imam alayhi salam, Ismail also. Imam Sadiq's son, Ismail, was also together with them. So Imam tells Ismail, فَقَالَ لِإِسْمَاعِيلِ قُمْ فَسَلِّمْ عَلَى جَدِّكَ الْحُسَيْنِ عَلَيْهِ السَّلَامِ. Stand up and do salam to your grandfather Imam Husayn alayhi salam. So Ismail turns back to Imam and tells him, جُعِلْتُ فِدَاكَ أَلَيْسَ الْحُسَيْنِ بِكَرْبَلَاء. Even he's surprised that, is Imam Husayn not buried in Karbala? So Imam tells him, Na'am, yes, he's buried in Karbala. Now look at the answer, okay? This is where I want to focus upon. ولكن لما حمل رأسه إلى الشام, when the head of Imam Husayn alayhi salam was taken to Damascus, سرقه مولا لنا. This is a very important point. One of our friends went and stole the head. And this is why I'm trying to give the probability of the opinion that the head was taken and not taken by the fourth Imam. It was taken by somebody else. Okay? So, سَرَقَهُ مَوْلًا لَنَا. One of our friends took it and went and stole it from Sham. فَدَفَنَهُ بِجَنْبِ أَمِيرِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ عَلَيْهِ السَّلَامِ. And he buried it near the grave of Imam Ali alayhi salam. Do you get me? Okay? There are other riwayats also about Kufa and the burial in Kufa. I will not get into those discussions, inshallah, if we get time further. The interesting riwayats which need to be discussed also, but inshallah some other time in the future. So in conclusion, you got the picture. We were discussing the issue of the head of Imam Husayn alayhi salam. We don't have discussion about the heads. Okay? So if you see statements from scholars, it's purely based on assumptions. Okay? Number one. Number two, we said that the head of Imam Husayn alayhi salam being buried in Karbala is based on Shuhra. So we said some scholars accept Shuhra and fame, some don't. Okay, so those who accept it, okay, don't accept it, that can be another narrative then. We don't have a right to come and impose this narrative. Okay, and finally, we have this proper contradiction. Okay, and this is something I would like you to go and research further and ask your scholars, how do you sort out these contradictions? Okay, that you have a proper contradiction of Shuhra on one side and riwayats. The riwayats which we saw, they're in classical sources. They're not even in later sources to come and say that, oh, we will dismiss them. They're in earlier sources, okay? That which says that the head of Imam Husayn alayhi salam was buried in Kufa, near Imam Ali alayhi salam's grave, okay? So we have a classical case of contradiction now. What do we do in this case? I leave it upon you. Let's pray to Allah. Allah give us the tawfiq to be able to learn His religion the way He wants us to learn, and then to be able to act upon the religion, inshallah, the way He wants us to act upon. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.